So now we're going to go into the elements of poetry. So these are the building blocks, and we're going to focus on rhyme, rhythm, and repetition. Rhyme and rhythm are built by what is called meter. I don't know if any of y'all know Byron. A lot of poets who write traditional forms of poetry recognize Byron for his very strict understanding of what is considered to be good poetry and bad poetry. And good poetry is typically identified by its use of meter and rhyme. We live in a world that kind of is more flexible with our understanding of what makes good art versus what makes bad art. That's also a lot to get into. We won't, get too philosophical there, but yeah, we're going to explore what meter is right now. So meter is the structure of a line as it is created by syllables. So for example, red fish, blue fish. Say that's one line. Red fish, blue fish. Those are 4 syllables. Syllables are the number of vowels pronounced in a word. And the examples I provided are hi, which has 1 syllable, and then was up, which has 2 syllables. Vowels typically are connected with consonants, but they don't always have to be. They can be pronounced on their own, or they can be pronounced with a consonant in a word. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Me again. So remember we were talking about like basic poetry, like roses are red, violets are blue. Is that like a basic example of this
Yeah, it's a fundamental
structure?
understanding of how
Okay.
poetry can be written.
And I loved how you used music as an analogy because it has beats, and I think that's helpful.
Yes, when you get into the more technical aspects of learning poetry, you will learn how to scan a poem based off of the beats and the syllables that are presented in metrical forms of poetry, traditional forms of poetry. That is called scansion, when you scan a poem and you annotate it for syllables and beats, because beats are the emphasis of syllables, and that gets into stressed and unstressed forms of writing poetry, which, like Shakespeare, for example, who wrote iambic pentameter, that is a perfect example of metrical verse that is standard for poetry. So I've provided an example of Hug o' War by Shel Silverstein. If any of y'all know who Shel Silverstein is, he wrote books, poetry books for children to help communicate certain themes about life and, make poetry accessible. So now that we have an understanding of what meter is, we can get into rhythm and rhyme schemes. So rhyme schemes are the repetition of words at the end of each line that have either the same vowel sounds or the same consonant sounds. So assonance is repetition of vowel sounds, like in this poem, hug and tug, which are presented towards the end of the first 2 lines and then repeated in the 3rd and 4th lines with hugs and tugs, as well as the word rug, which is in the 6th line. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds, which in this poem would be cuddles and giggles. That dulls, gulls, that ulls ending is what makes it consonants. So that is one important element of creating rhythm and a rhyme scheme in a poem. That also includes a repetition of words and phrases like "oh war" at the end of the first 2 lines, and that is considered epistrophe, which is the repetition of words or phrases at the end of a line. And then we also have anaphora in this poem, which is a repetition of words and phrases at the beginning of a line. So like the last 3 lines of this poem, and everyone grins, and everyone cuddles, and everyone wins.